afternoon. Thank you so much for the contribution. And with that, I would like to now move on to our next speaker on the panel. It's also one of those topics that has come, we've heard a little bit about it also within the context of the war that is going on currently in Ukraine. But of course, I mean, during this forum, we'll look at that in more broader and slightly more broader context. So we'll be switching now from chemical and biological and more mid-spectrum agents to really radiological and sort of nuclear arena threats. And it is with a great pleasure that I would like to introduce now Professor Andrea Malizia from of the University of Rome Tor Vergata. He's an assistant professor in nuclear measures and instrumentations at the Department of Biomedicine and Prevention. And his field of research is related to nuclear measures and instrumentation, software to stimulate radiological and nuclear dispersion and diffusion. He's also the didactical coordinator of the international master courses in protection against CBRN events. And he's cooperating with the most national and international entities involved in security and safety in this field. He lectures in physics, in laser systems, nuclear fusion, energy, measurements, and he's an author of more than 130 scientific publications and also a guest editor of international journals. He's experienced and trained in physics and plasma physics, electronics, and industrial engineering. Without further ado, Professor Malizia, please, you have the floor, and thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and for making time to speak to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Novosilova, for the introduction and for having me and my university in your conference. May you hear me well? Okay, so I'm going to share the screen and start the presentation. Okay. Okay, so my presentation is on the radiological dispersion device, the improvised nuclear device, the dirty bombs, and talk about the risk related to the use of this kind of devices. I will tell something about the protection, something less about the detection, and I will talk about some method to try to prevent or at least understand in advance the effect of this kind of device if they are used. I have prepared this work together with a colleague of the University of Rome Tor Vergata, Dr. Riccardo Quaranta, and with Gianmarco Contessa from the research entity Enea in Italy, and with Dr. Marco D'Arienzo, who works in the Italian health system. So this is the agenda of the presentation. I will introduce you what is an improvised nuclear device, what is a radioactive dispersion device, and a dirty bombs, and we will see a little bit the difference among these devices. We will talk about some of the potential economic and psychological effects in case of the use of such a device. As I told before, we will talk about protection, a little bit about the detection, and the potential routes of dispersion. So let's talk about the END. END, it's improvised nuclear device as a result. This can be built in by a terroristic group, for instance, even in lab. And usually we do refer to this kind of device when the energy released by the device are less than 10 kilotons. As most of you know, 1 kiloton is a quantity of energy equivalent to the energy released by the explosion of 1,000 tons of TNT. So it's something about 4.1 terajoule, which is quite a huge amount of energy. So if we are less than 10 kilotons, we usually can talk about END. What are the effects, the main effect of DND? Well, the main effect of DND are that a blast is produced and there are light waves, heat waves, and high waves as well. And there is a sort of dust and debris that is pulled upward like to form a sort of mushroom clouds. And then you can have a radiological fallout. You have a light flash that can be seen until 10 to 15 kilometers, high velocity winds, and you can have, of course, the cross-contamination of animals, the cross-contamination of water, of food, of persons, and of houses as well. When we do talk about RED, radiological exposure devices, we basically refer to those devices that are released close the person that can travel, for instance, on a train or on an airplane or on the subway. So basically the amount of damage depends on the type of radiological source that is used, the part of the body that is exposed by the radiological source, and the amount of time that's passed on having this kind of exposition. So we can have effects that are visible after hours, days, or weeks, still lethal effects like cancer. In the end, when we do talk about radiological dispersal device, we can say that the so-called dirty bombs are a sort of radiological dispersal device. What does it mean? It does means that basically it is a bomb that is done with regular explosive, and inside that it is added also a radiological source. So basically, the main risk is not the blast in this case, but the radioactive contamination that you can have. But the main risk is the dust and debris that are released after the explosion that have radioactive contamination that can be transferred to the vehicles, to the animals, to the peoples, and to the infrastructures and the buildings. These are bombs quite easy to prepare if you have, let's say, the availability of a radiological source. It's very cheap and it's very easy to build it in a laboratory or even inside the room. And dirty bombs cannot be considered atomic bombs. If we do talk about atomic bomb, we do talk about a device that can cause thousands of casualties, that can destroy large cities, and that has a fallout that can reach hundreds of square kilometers. When we talk about dirty bombs, the physical damage is related to the quantity of the explosive that is used, and the fallout usually is large, maximum a few hundreds of square meters. But again, the availability of radiological sources and the, let's say, easy way in which this kind of device can be built make the dirty bomb a real and actual threat. Here you can see some, but not all full list, but some of the material that can be used to create dirty bombs. For instance, tritium, uranium-235, plutonium-239, americium-241, cobalt-60, iodine-131, and so on. These are present also, for instance, for medical application mounted on the TC, for instance. And as I told before, it is not much complicated to create a dirty bombs like creating a conventional bombs. It is not required a special assembly. You have just to need basically an explosive substance, and you need a radiological source. The hard part of work is finding radioactive material. What are the main effects in case of an explosion of dirty bombs? But first of all, we have for sure a potential economic effect. In which term? If you have a dirty bomb explosion in some suburban area of a large city, I have done, for instance, some simulation with my colleagues, and we will see it later in the area of Rome. There are very populated areas. If we take as an example the block Appio Tuscolano is in Rome. It is an area with more than 200,000 persons living in there. There are a lot of buildings, a lot of infrastructure. So if you have an explosion of a dirty bomb, you have this radioactive dust that can decontaminate the buildings. So you should try not only to avoid the cross-contamination among people, not only to try to decontaminate people, but you should decontaminate the buildings as well, which is quite complicated, or you should destroy and rebuild the building, which is very cost-effective, as you can imagine. Another important effect that is related to the economic one and has economic consequences as well are the potential psychological effects. In which term? Let me take you as an example one episode that happened here in Rome in 2009. In 2009, one person called the police, and just to make a joke, this person told to the police that he or her released a radioactive material inside the water pipeline of the city of Rome. It was a joke, of course, but somehow this news, this call went viral on internet and on the radio. And it takes a few hours to have the authorities telling to all the population that it was a fake news, and not all the population has been reached by the official news of the authority. So in the next 48 hours from this phone call joke, in the city of Rome and in the area surrounding the city of Rome, we had, I can remember, more than 70,000 access inside the emergency department. Now in Italy, we have a public health system. When you step into the emergency department, just to tell that you feel bad and you need a check, it costs to the health system roughly €300 per person per access. So you can imagine in 48 hours, we had accesses of 70,000 persons. And if you consider €300 of cost for the health system per person per access, you have the amount of money that the Italian health system loses in 2 days for a joke, for a fake news, for basically for a fake news that went viral. So the psychological effect can have the same impact of the real one in terms of economic, let's say, impact as well. Then there is also another things. Some of the psychological effects that are caused by panic. So you can have problems to the head. You can start to see a little bit flurry. You can have some nausea. You can have some vomit, some diarrhea. are the same effect that you have at the initial stage of a radiological contamination. So you can imagine a lot of people with a panic attack that believe that they have radiological contamination. It has been quite a mess. So we have to consider also that it's important to inform and reach the population with the right news through the authority, and sometimes it is not easy. Let's see now some of the protection action that have to be taken immediately after the explosion of dirty bombs. If you are outside and close to the incident, you have to cover your nose and mouth in order to breathe less of the radioactive dust or smoke that is produced. You have not to touch objects to avoid cross-contamination. You have to go to the closest building with windows or walls that are not broken. You have to remove your clothing. You have to wash yourself. You have to put your clothing in a bag and put the bag far away from other person. And you have to listen the authority for more instruction. If you are inside and close to the incident, you have to verify that the walls and windows of the building that is hosting you are not broken. You have to stay there and you have not to leave. You have avoid the entrance of radioactive dust through the windows. So you have to shut all the windows and doors and the fireplace dampers as well. And you have to clean the house or clean the environments if some of the radioactive dust enter inside. You have to turn off fans, you have to turn off heating, you have to turn off air condition. And if you receive some cross-contamination from the windows, you have to remove your clothes again, put it in the bag and having a shower. If you stay in the car, you have to close the windows, you have to turn off air conditioner, heater and vents. You have to cover nose and mouth to avoid to breathe the radioactive dust. And if you cannot go home, you have to go to the closest building that can safely host you with the wall and windows that are not broken. And if you cannot go out from the car, you have to stay in and waiting that the road is free. If you are with your family or your children, you have to take care about you in the same way that we have seen now, and we have to take care about the children with the same precaution that we use for ourselves. And if they are in the school, we have to try to maintain the calm and leave them in the school, because till the authority tells us that it is safe to go to get them, because school has emergency plans and shelters. Some school has shelters as well. So they are in the safest place possible in that moment. Again, if you have pets and they are outside, you have to bring in inside if it is safe for you and your family, and you have to wash the pets to remove the dust contamination. Should I take potassium iodine? Well, you should listen again the advice of the authorities, because potassium iodine cover only protect the thyroid gland and not all the organs of the body, and sometimes it's dangerous for some persons. So you should try to check with your doctor and listen the suggestion of the authorities. And what about the food and water supplies? Food and water supplies most likely will remain safe, but the unpackaged food that has been cross-contaminated by dust has to be removed. And if you have food inside the can that are sealed, you can eat it. Water inside the bottle that are sealed, you can drink it. And for all the other stuff, it is better again to wait suggestion from the authorities. How do I know if I am exposed to radiation or contaminated by radioactive material? Well, as you know, radiological contamination cannot be seen, smelled, felt, or tasted. So you have not idea if you are exposed or not. You have to wait the first responder, police or firefighters, to make a check of the radiation and tell you what kinds and what quantity of radiation you have taken, and if you have to go immediately to the hospital or checked by the doctor or not. What about the detection? Well, what I can tell about the detection, and there are three main families of detector that are gas-filled detector, and one of the most common gas-filled detector are the Geiger-Müller one. The Geiger-Müller can be used to do detection and not identification, so you can check if radioactive contamination is in progress, but you cannot have an information about the type of radiation or the type of source that is involved in that contamination. In order to do in order to have this kind of information, you can use other type of detectors like the scintillators, which is the second main family of detectors, or the semiconductors that are both able to build up energy. Some of them in the market are able to build up energy spectrum that can give you an information about the type of substance, because it is a sort of the energy spectra is a sort of fingerprint of some substance or some substance families. Almost all the products in the market have very quick time of response. We are talking about seconds, and if you are interested in having some details on that, there are a couple of interesting reviews that I can share with you, and you can share with the with person who are participating at the conference, or other person who are interested. It is not a problem. We do work a lot here at the University of Rome Tor Vergata on prevention as well, through the use of numerical software. With numerical simulation, we basically try to understand what can happen if there is the use of an improvised nuclear device or of a dirty bomb. We try to couple, of course, these numerical simulation with meteorological models also, to see how the wind and the presence of obstacles can facilitate or not the dispersion of this radioactive dust. And we do use basically a lot this software, which is one of the many software available. The good thing about this software is that it is a free license, so we use it also for didactic purpose. Is hotspot that is developed by the Livermore laboratories in USA, and with this we can have plum of total effective dose and of dose that goes on the ground, basically. So this is one of the paper that is open access. You can find it and download it online, in which we have analyzed the explosion of a dirty bomb. So we have analyzed it basically through hotspot, a dirty bomb attack in Rome, simulating the dispersion of radioactive devices. You can download and read it. And what can I say? What can I say more? I hope that all this kind of let's say all this kind of events and all this kind of threats, I hope that will remain just theoretical study and simulation, and I hope that we will not have it in our real life. Thank you so much for the attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Malizia, for the interesting and insightful talk and for the comprehensive overview of some of the threats, but also the response measures that can be implemented and undertaken. And so I'm just looking at the Q&A panel, and I would like once again to remind all our participants that you can post questions and comments into the Q&A panel, and we'll make sure to bring those into the discussion. I see none at the moment, but I would like to just build on, follow on a line of thought that you started in your presentation and ask a question with regard to that, because you did mention the risk of hoax attacks and how resourceful the response to such attacks like hoaxes and fake alerts essentially could be, and how people could misuse that. But it's the same pretty much with disinformation, because we've seen that with the ongoing hostilities in Ukraine, for instance, when there was a situation around Zaporozhye, which is still, of course, ongoing, but people in the region got on edge because there were rumors that there might be a leak of radiation. People started buying therapeutics, iodine, and all that. So my question is more about how could we be better prepared for this kind of fake alerts or disinformation or threats at a social level? So what could be done to enhance, so to speak, societal resilience, awareness, information about those threats?
The answer is easy, and the actuation is difficult. We should educate the people to believe in the authorities. And it's very difficult, because we had also, for the COVID pandemic situation, people that take jab of alcohol or of peroxide hydrogen because some politicians say that it kills the virus, and they kill about the jabs. So it is more or less the same thing. There is the IEA news alert on the Ukraine-Russian situation, which is updated daily, even more than one information per day. And once I start to read this rumor on the nets, I just invite all the people that I know to read the news on the official news of the Atomic Agency. That's a inspector in the area, and that basically have calmed down the population. So first of all, listen and read only the authorities and the official source of information. Second, and this is something that we have to do all together, in my opinion, educate people to believe in the authorities. How you can do that? Starting from the elementary school, when people are starting with the babies, continuing till the university, and also in the conference. I mean, giving first of all the real perception of what is risk. Do not make a confusion between risk, probability, and magnitude of effect are related but are not the same thing. So the risk of an atomic bomb is high. True. Why? Because an explosion can cause a lot of damage to the population and to the cities. The probability of the explosion of atomic bomb is very low. Why the risk of dirty bomb is higher? Dirty bomb has smallest effects, but it is easiest to build up a dirty bomb, and it is more complicated to tell who has used this kind of device or where it is produced. So the probability of the use of this dirty bomb is higher, rather than the damage that the dirty bomb can do compared to an atomic one. So even start to learn to the person the meaning of the words. that we use when we talk about safety, security, and we talk about risk, and try to convince people with different background and education that authority are not making disinformation. I mean, the most of the authorities are not making disinformation, and they try to give this kind of information to help you to live in a better way your life, and not to get you in panic. So this is the first message. I know that there are countries in which the information is not so free, and in which it is difficult to have this kind of, let's say, of education. Even in the one in which the information is free, there are many people that do not believe to authorities. So maybe another step, but this is not my field of expertise, is work a lot in terms of international cooperation to try to reach the highest number of people possible and educate them at any kind of level. But before educating, you need the people to believe in what we are going to say. So this is the most difficult part, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. Yes, public trust and trust in institutions, that's something that's definitely COVID-19 has demonstrated that it's something that we all need to work on, even in societies where institutions usually do their job the way they should, not only because we've heard in the previous presentation where there are, I mean, we've observed where there are situations where authorities are not necessarily to be trusted and could use those opportunities, but even in situations where when crisis occurs, it's very difficult sometimes to discern fact from fiction, and having public trust in institution and trust-based policy is something that is of great essence, really. And we also have one more technical question in our Q&A panel. So one of our participants is asking, so besides wind, what other factors could influence the spread of radiological dust? For example, heat or humidity, are they among those factors? And also, is there a chance of recovery, or rather, what is the chance of recovery after coming into contact with radiological dust? So, thank you.
It's quite a long answer. I will try to simplify it. Regarding the let's say facility of spreading of these radioactive dust, the most let's say important factor to consider are the meteorological conditions. So the meteorological condition can be divided in a series of classes that are called Pasquier classes. You have from A to F, so from a totally stable to totally unstable condition, having let's say the maximum of stability, of the maximum of turbulence, do not help the spread to go very far away from the point of the explosion. So a small wind, let's say 1 to 10 meters per second, and condition in which you have environmental temperature 15 to, not the environmental one, I mean, if you are in the range of the environmental one, 15 to 30, maybe, and not a high percentage of humidity, maybe are good condition to let the dust go far away from the buildings. Then, if you are a very clever terrorist, let's say, you can use the canyon inside the building to help you to spread the substances. You have to study the wind among the buildings and the canyon. Otherwise, it is easiest to spread it where there is not any obstacles. but if you have not obstacles, usually you have not buildings and people, so you do not care to spread any radioactive substances. And referring to the condition, if you have acute effects, so if you start vomiting or you have your skin that is burning, you have to go immediately to the doctor or to the hospital. If you have long but small exposition to the radiation, and there is all the ICRP related to the radioprotection that's explain the table of the doses, you can or you cannot have affected long term, like some kind of disease or cancers. That is the worst case scenario. It is important to point out that when there are you can find the weighting factor for the exposition to certain type of radiation, alpha, beta, gamma, and so on, and the weighting factor to the exposition of each organ to each kind of radiation. This weighting factor have been obtained through statistical analysis over large amount of person from different background, ethnicity, ages, and health condition. So even those health factors are related to a statistical analysis. So it is not sure that if you have a medium or long exposition, you for sure develop cancer. You can have nothing. You can have a small exposition, but be somehow, let's say, have a genetic predisposition to develop certain disease, and the radioactive contamination can be just the little push that you need to take the disease. I am not sorry, I cannot go into the numbers and details because it takes some hour, but I hope that I reply to the question.
Thank you so much. That was very detailed and also very understandable for people who are not necessarily in the field. So for that reason, thank you so much for being able to so succinctly sort of put it and present it in a nice and easy to comprehend and understand way. So, well, you're experienced, you're a lecturer, so what can you say? Thank you so much for this. I'm just looking if there are any additional questions at this point of time. I think there are none. With that, I would suggest that we can just